Thank you all for being here today. I'm going to go ahead and get it started and introduce our Commissioner, Chris Filios, but I want to first thank all of our sponsors today: Advanced Benefits, Northwest Specialty, the Coeur d'Alene Realtors Association, Schaefer's Towing, and Idaho Forest Group. If you'll please give them a round of applause, thank them. So, yeah. Chris, are you ready for this crowd? All right, if everybody give a round of applause for Chris Filios, our Commissioner.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for hosting us. Thank you, Daryl. Thank you, Chamber. Thank you, sponsors. Before I get on, I guess, with the formality, if you want to call it that, of my presentation, what I'd like to do, since we've just gone through a very, very difficult year plus with the pandemic, probably one of the most trying periods in our history as a nation, perhaps certainly over a period of decades. And what I'd like to do is thank some of the folks and some of the organizations that have really stepped up throughout this very trying period. And so let me take you back to mid-March of last year. I actually signed as chairman the emergency declaration that essentially precipitated our ability to access both state and federal funds. The cities followed suit, and you pretty much know the rest from there. So what I wanted to do was give a special thanks to certain groups. Let's start with former Sheriff Ben Wilfinger, our current Chief Chris Way, Kootenai Fire and Rescue, Office of Emergency Management led by Tiffany Westbrook. Tiffany, stand up, please. Let's hear a round of applause for Tiffany. Tiffany assumed the position kind of midway through from Sandy Van Buren, who retired after decades with the county. We've got folks, by the way, OEM provided a lot of the PPE equipment, provided a lot of the support, set up the Emergency Operations Center that others participated in, and some of you folks were active in that endeavor as well. Also want to thank our department heads and county employees, certainly first responders. They kept things moving with technology, supporting each other with PPE, as I mentioned earlier. And also a real shout out and a real thanks to our community partners, Kootenai Health, Heritage Health, Panhandle Health, and I especially want to applaud Panhandle Health. They had a very difficult year. As you know, the two medical professionals that sit on that board were appointed by Kootenai County, and that was Jay Nelson, who was a nurse, and Dr. McClandress, a physician. They've had a very trying year, and I think they've done their very best. They certainly functioned within the purview of their specialties and did what they felt they needed to do. And as well, Coeur d'Alene Fire, Area Agency on Aging, and certainly other folks who worked with Panhandle Health, and especially doing as well as we have and making the progress that we have with vaccinations. Also want to thank the Kroc Center, because they provided volunteers to the Emergency Operations Center, facilitated donations during the activation, and supported Heritage Health in the vaccination efforts. So how about a round of applause for everybody who contributed? Okay, Tari, we're ready to go. By the way, there'll be copies of the presentation if you're interested. I'll make it available through the chamber. As I like to do with every presentation that I give, the county is somewhat of a complex structure. It's apparent every time we have a public meeting or public hearing how little people know about how we function, how many we are, and it's always incumbent upon me to try to essentially detail how we function. First of all, we have 3 county commissioners. I'll ask Leslie Duncan to stand up, my co-commissioner. Okay, one of my co-commissioners. Okay, Leslie and Bill Brooks, of course. They've been in office 2 years. And I've been with you now for 4+ years. And so essentially what we have 9 elected officials. We have, of course, the 3 county commissioners, assessor, clerk, coroner, prosecutor, sheriff, and treasurer. Everyone is independently elected. We have our sheriff here, our newly elected sheriff, Bob Norris. Bob, where are you, sir? Okay, welcome. And what is our role? What is their role? Essentially, the role of county commissioners and the role of the county in general is to collect taxes and provide for public health and safety. Now, there's a lot involved therein, but essentially that's the quick summation. And so while The sheriff is responsible for public safety. We do control his budget, but I can't tell him how to do his job. I can only say, gee, Bob, they're gonna have to do with a few less deputies. Of course, that would never happen because the county's growing at such a rapid rate. Welcome, Bob. Anyway, let's take a look at some of the challenges that we faced over this past year. Let's look at population growth. From 2009 to 2019, we've gone from about 140,000 up to 166,000. And so we've been growing, needless to say, at a very rapid rate, and that's probably the key challenge confronting this county. Let's see how we measure growth. Incidentally, what I'm going to be touching on this morning is growth, taxes, and the budget. So that kind of encompasses much of what we do. Let's look at building permit applications by type. Look at the residential, 2,329. When we talk mechanical, site disturbance, commercial, those are other related permits that we issue. But to give you a better picture, let's take a look at the building permits as a 10-year trend. In 2010, 1,479 building permits, to 2020, 3,228. So we have more than doubled the number of permits that we're issuing over a 10-year period. And that really speaks to the level of growth that we've been experiencing. And we just went through the building permits by type. Let's look at permit applications, a year-to-date comparison. The light green is 2020, the dark green is 2021. Take a look at the last two bar graph sets. So residential was 325 that's year-to-date, today, the dark bar graph, 201 year-to-date last year. So that's an increase of approximately 120, that's about a 70% increase, just year-to-date. And that's what we're confronted with. And just so you know, and especially those of us in the real estate and building community, our permits were backed up. We're looking at about a 3-month turnaround. What we have done is not only increase the wages and increase the staffing, but also contracted with a couple of firms in Colorado that do permit and plan review for us. And we've been able to whittle down the backlog from over 400 down to 200. And so we're working toward getting the turnaround from the current approximately 3 months down to 3 weeks. So we're working very rigorously in that regard. And by the way, our permit techs and our planning people, many of these folks, they're almost all degreed, and many of them have advanced degrees, so they're not very easy to come by. Okay, let's talk property taxes. So how can we talk growth without discussing property taxes? Property taxes was probably the main theme in the legislature this year, as it was last. Idaho, for all the talk of how high our property taxes are, ranks 14th lowest. So 37 states have higher taxes than we do, all right? And by the way, we do have a tax problem, but I think the tax problem is more structural than the actual valuations. Let's look at property tax rates per $100,000 of valuation. This is Kootenai County compared to the other 4 larger counties. You'll see we're the lowest taxing of the 5 bigger counties. These are primarily the urban counties. These 5 counties constitute probably 70% of the state's population. Incidentally, Idaho is no longer considered a rural state. We're considered suburban, okay? Largely because a large percentage of our population does in fact reside in the cities, okay? And so that's a quick look at how we rank for property taxation. Let's look at how Kootenai County ranks among other jurisdictions. The light green is Kootenai County. We're right in the middle of the pack. The lowest taxing entity within the county itself, that's us compared to the other cities, is Dalton Gardens, and the highest is Spirit Lake. Kootenai County is roughly in the middle, a little bit on the lower side, and you can get a picture. Okay, let's take a look at where we are this year. So this year, we did not take a tax increase. Let me pause here and explain something about property taxes. People say, you raise my taxes, you raise my taxes. Okay, fine. When you look at your tax bill, typically you're going to find somewhere between 6 and 8 entities that you're being taxed for, depending on where you reside within the county. Well, On that tax bill, we, the county, to run our operations, our 830 employees, our sheriff's organization, all the facilities, all the vehicles, we constitute about 25% of your total tax bill. That is the piece that we three county commissioners control. We do not control the school levies. We do not control the other jurisdictions. They have their own commissioners, be it highway, be it fire. We are responsible for the top 25%. However, we collect for all the jurisdictions. So when you pay your taxes, you pay them to the county, and we in turn distribute that money to the other taxing entities. That's the way it works. So we took a 0% tax increase for this current fiscal year. We also reduced our budget by over $2 million from the year before. We were at about $101 million. This year, we're running at just under $99 million. And the other point I should make here is that when the governor came out with his property tax relief initiative, we did not take it, and it would have been somewhere, I believe, in the vicinity of $10 million. And the reason we did not accept it is we could not get assurances from Treasury, U.S. Treasury, that we would not be on the hook to repay the money if, in fact, we were in potential violation of the terms and conditions, which we never saw in writing. So we made the decision not to accept the money. Some jurisdictions did, and that's fine. That's entirely up to them. So let's look at valuation versus taxation. This is actually very telling. If you look at the increase in property values from 2016 to 2020, you can see that the increase runs from about 6% to roughly just over 16%. And the black line that crosses or traverses the bar graphs is the actual property tax. So property taxes as a percentage of valuation have not increased as much, or for that matter, essentially, if you were to smooth out that line, are basically stable. The situation that we have with taxation may be more structural than the actual amount of taxes that people are paying. Now, it does occasionally present a hardship for folks who are retired, but as county commissioners, we have the authority not only to reduce people's taxes or individual taxes, we can actually cancel them. But obviously that would depend on demonstrated hardship, but we do have that ability by statute. Let's look at, once again, talking about growth in taxes, back and forth, income to home price ratio. A couple of weeks ago, I had the privilege, and it always is a privilege to listen to Sam Wolkenauer from the Idaho Department of Labor, and he talked about when you look at historic income to house price ratios, typically a price of a home historically has run around 3 times annual income. Well, in Kootenai County, we're running at 6.7. Probably the nation is up near us as well. How about Bonner? 7.2. So, and that's probably due to the very high prices on their waterfront. And also, they don't seem to have a lower, not that we do anymore, or mid-range housing market. So that probably explains some of the differences. Realtor.com ranks Coeur d'Alene and Spokane among the nation's 10 hottest housing markets. Anecdotally, I hear people from both, not just obviously California has been lending people for decades, but even now from the East Coast, people are talking about Coeur d'Alene and Idaho in general. And what's interesting is when we look at house prices, because that is, we're pretty much, one would agree, I think most of us, that we're in crisis mode here. There is a statement and a saying in the commodities trading world that there's no better cure for higher prices than higher prices. If any of you have ever dabbled in the futures markets, when prices get high, what happens? At some point, the demand drops off. As the demand drops off, the prices decline. And the same thing is true in real estate. Real estate historically has had recessions. My wife has been in the real estate industry as an appraiser for going on now 4 decades. I suspect she's already been through probably a half dozen recessions. The good thing about appraising is you set them up and then you take them down. So they have business on both ends typically, but it's, so that's not to say she's hoping for a recession, but I hear the horror stories every night, sometimes homes doubling in as little as 12 to 18 months. And that is just simply unsustainable, but who knows where the end lies. Let's take a look at fiscal year-to-date budget. Basically, what we do is every month we naturally track our budget. How are we going according to plan, according to the adopted budget? How's our spending with regard to that budget? And you can see that basically we're all operating, for the most part, tracking or operating under our anticipated budget year to date. The only one that's slightly over is the sheriff, but that's minuscule. It's 0.6%. And really, that has probably more to do when certain expenses come due as opposed to any anticipated revenue. So sometimes the sheriff, maybe because of a situation or whatever, might occur more expenses in a particular month or a particular period and less so in the ensuing periods. But we're tracking reasonably well according to our adopted and amended budget, okay? And you can see that the two largest segments of our budget are the sheriff and the BOCC. When I say the BOCC, those are the 17 departments that work for the Board of County Commissioners. And those are departments like the public defender, information technology, solid waste. Well, actually, their solid waste is more of an enterprise. But we do have 17 departments, and if you get copies of the presentation, you can see that in the first slide. Okay, let's look at our fund balance. Another way to think of fund balance is savings, but the government term is fund balance. And we talk in terms of assigned fund balance. That's fund balance that we've dedicated to a particular purpose or a particular application. And then we have unassigned fund balance. So as of September 30th, which would have been the end of fiscal year 20, that fund balance was at just over 13 million. We've lowered it down to about 11 million. The unassigned still remains at 20 million, so that's money that's yet to be allocated. So we're in pretty healthy shape. The county has technically no debt, but I want to qualify that because last year we went into a 3-year lease purchase for the sheriff's vehicles. So instead of allocating money on a yearly basis to purchase 8 or 9 vehicles, what we did is we went into a 3-year lease purchase and were able to purchase 25 new, basically interceptors. Those are the vehicles that you see the deputies drive. And so at the end of a 3-year period, we buy them back for $1 a piece. And those vehicles average about 15,000 miles a year. So we buy them back for $1 and get another 3 or 4 years use from those vehicles. So do we have no debt? Technically, we don't, but yeah, in a sense we do because it's a lease purchase. Okay. Let's just do a quick review of our accomplishments over this past year. And I probably failed to capture them all. $200,000 we contributed to the National Academy of Sciences study. That's estimated to be completed in May of 2023. It's a 2-year study. The study has already begun. They've assembled a team of 13 experts from around the country, and I've said in other venues, and I'll say it again, we live or die by the health of Coeur d'Alene Lake. And over the years, the county has participated but has never spent a dime, so this year we put our money where our mouth is. It's a $770,000 study, and the county's putting up $200,000. We made the offer to the governor. It went silent for a while, and then the governor's office called and said, is it still good? And so we passed it. And so hopefully, when that study is completed, we'll have a seat at the table. And the study is not going to recommend initially the remedial action, but it is going to identify the state of the lake and which way it's trending. I know the tribe has some serious concerns. We passed an excessive wake ordinance for the waterways, very controversial. We'll be taking it up again very shortly, largely for the Spokane River, but the other water bodies as well. Secured an architect for a new justice building. That's LCA Architects. They are the same folks who designed the jail expansion for us, which incidentally came in on time and under budget by $500,000. We expedited the approval process for rural broadband. Intermax came to us and said, look, I know you guys need permits for us to be able to go forward, but they had a very stringent deadline to be able to access the federal funds. Thanks to Dave Callahan and Community Development, we expedited the process. They secured the funds, and they're in the process of or have already installed those towers to expand broadband. Purchased the KEC building. That's Kootenai Electric, which will be known as Kootenai County North. Kootenai Electric, I learned recently, has already located another lot or site for their expansion. And so they'll be moving probably, if they're on schedule, within about 2.5 to 3 years. That is 56,000 square feet for us, plus 13 equipment bays. It sits on 11 acres, buried fuel tanks, so we'll be able to essentially fuel all our county vehicles. And one of the initial thoughts that we have is to set up a northernmost DMV and driver license so folks from the Athol and Rathbun area don't have to trek all the way into Coeur d'Alene. And so hopefully that'll go smoothly for us. We sold the Hamilton House, which was on the corner of Government and Foster, for the Coeur d'Alene Music Conservatory, thanks to a joint effort by Mayor Widmeyer and Pepper Smock. And so they are leasing that building to the conservatory, which incidentally is a neat addition because up in Sandpoint, they started their conservatory with 4 people, and it's now up to 400 students. So if Sandpoint can do it, why can't we, right? Okay, we received $4 million COVID money for public transit. And so Jody Beasy and our Resource Management Office is looking for ways to expand public transit to our other locales. We also had a flawless elections management by our election staff. Is anyone here from the election staff? No, so that would be our clerk, Jim Brannon, of course, Jennifer Locke, who runs elections, and Shelley Amos, who is not with us either today, but they did a great job. So let's see, what else? Increased hiring at DMV. The assessor requested for more manpower. He's gotten more manpower, and I suspect he's going to need even more. And some of the issues that are being experienced there really relate to what's been going on at the state, because the state has implemented new software, and there were hacks with the software, and the interaction was difficult, and then, of course, compounded by the growth. But we're trying to work through that problem even as I speak. We relocated our Office of Emergency Management to the Armory. We have possession of the Armory, so Tiffany and her staff now have no need to relocate to establish an emergency operations center should another emergency arise. And as a probably best measure of growth and its impact, or one of the impacts, is our solid waste organization. Solid waste has increased their capacity. I shouldn't say that. They have taken in 9.6% more tonnage, I won't say garbage, more tonnage. Meanwhile, the population's only grown, I shouldn't say only, but 2 to 2.5%. So 4 times as much tonnage coming to the waste, coming to the solid waste organization, to the dump, if you will, as population increase in the county. So, and a lot of it probably has to do with the new construction. So that's pretty much it. Any surprises for fiscal 21? 10-day fair. Normally the fair runs for 5 days. Our fairgrounds staff has decided that they're going to proceed with a 10-day fair. So hopefully we'll have something to celebrate when this is all over. And thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. And now, Bill Brooks. And Bill will talk about the organizations that he liaisons with and key events and proposals. And Bill, take it away.
As was noted, we've been in the news a lot lately because we're doing a lot. And we're not homogeneous in how we approach these things. I have my PowerPoint in my lap. It's low tech, but it works. One of the big things for me was Panhandle Health. I liaison with them, and very thankful for Laura Whalen's leadership. Where is Laura, by the way? Is she around? Okay, there she is, over there. She did a tremendous job, and we ended up with one position open, which was fine. And we appointed Dr. Jessica Jameson to that position, and or at least nominated her. Is that the proper word? Okay, yes. The other counties, all 4 other counties, get to weigh in on that, correct? Yes. So we'll be getting ballots today or tomorrow in the mail for that vote, but I think it's a foregone conclusion. She's fantastic. I don't know if you saw the article in the paper about her, but when I saw her resume, I knew this woman had to be in her 70s. And she's not. She's pretty amazing, amazing. And she's articulate. And then when we did nominate her, I talked to Dr. Richard McClandress, who I don't always agree with, but I think does a great job at Panhandle Health. And he was overjoyed. He said, she's somebody that I can do business with and work with. She's a true professional. Very happy about that. So Panhandle Health was a big part of everything going on. And then in addition to that, we had this thing, the form of county government that came up. And that's occupied some time this year. And last year when I was here, I mentioned this, that I wanted to see people have an opportunity to discuss the forms of government that are open to us in Idaho state statute, period. Have the conversation. And to do that in the most unbiased way, there's a study commission, and they will take their time and do what they do. The state statute gives them major latitude in how they approach this. So we'll see what happens. We're to come forward Monday with 3 names each. So that'll be the study commission. And once they may come out and say, we don't need to change anything at all. And if they do that, that's fine. If they have a recommendation, then they'll present it to the commissioners, and the commissioners will then decide to put it on the ballot, I hope. And at that point, the citizens will be able to say yes or no to any potential change. The sheriff has ducked out of here because he had a meeting, but Sheriff Norris is doing a great job. I appreciate him a lot. He's an honest guy that I can do business with, and when I ask him a question, I get a very direct answer. Sometimes I like, sometimes I don't. And I said to him, Bob, what would you have people understand? He said, well, right now, we have about 80% of our capacity in the jail per day. But I attribute that relatively low number to COVID. It's just kind of not where it usually is. Usually we're bumping up close to 90 and 95%. Sometimes we've even had to send people out to other localities. Here's the big one though. 70% of the people in there are in there for felonies. Felonies. Where it used to be just the opposite, where about 30-40% of the people were in there on felonies and the rest were misdemeanors. So we've got some people that need to be in jail. I really appreciate the way Sheriff Norris is getting out in the community. He's everywhere, you know. You go to a luncheon, you go to a dinner, and Bob's there. And so he's very accessible to people. And we've also got the help of Under Sheriff Matos, who's been there before, and good guy, and they work together like hand in glove. Wonderful to do business with both of them. I understand Under Sheriff Matos is in Wyoming someplace on a camping trip for a few days. He deserves it, so. Stability is the hallmark of a good sheriff's department, and I think we have that in Kootenai County. We tried very hard last year to start to get some sort of parity with some of the other law enforcement agencies in the area, because for a time we were actually losing some of our deputies to local law enforcement agencies, and not places like Seattle, but places like Post Falls and Coeur d'Alene. So we want to pay our people not at the top of the range necessarily, but we want to make it attractive. Right now, Norris told me, he said, my biggest problem is not hiring people. We can hire people, but my biggest problem is we hire people from outside, and where do they live? This slide Chris put up about 3 point whatever or 6 point whatever percent of, times your income for housing. I couldn't afford to live in anything much in Kootenai County these days. And a deputy, they start about $25,000 a year plus attractive benefits, but you can't pay your mortgage with a benefit. But we worked on that. Then we get to solid waste. That's one of my favorite departments. I keep calling it the dump, and they keep correcting me, solid waste. Well, I like my dump. I think our dump is worthy of tourism. It's so good. If you haven't been over there, you should, and you'll understand what I'm talking about. It smells good, it looks good, it's run efficiently, people are polite, you know, and they've done that, and you know, every citizen here of Kootenai County gets charged a dump fee. I'm sorry, solid waste fee. They said they would not like it if I said dump. But it's gone down. As Chris pointed out, the tonnage of garbage has gone up. But the cost that we charge citizens has gone down. And it's through good management and this enterprise fund that keeps the money safe. One of the things I'll tell you, we had a introduction to solid waste when I first came on the board a couple of years ago. And I didn't know this, there's liquid that comes out of the dump. Sorry, it's breakfast time, but you got to hear this. And it's not nasty stuff. And they try to evaporate it and get rid of it, and you can't just dump it into a stream or even under the earth. You have to dispose of it in very acceptable ways. So some of it's put in big ponds so it evaporates. Some of it is actually trucked away, which is not cheap, but we have to do it. But all that, millions of gallons of leachate, they call it. That's the proper name, leachate, not dump water. I call it dump water. Has to be handled very carefully. But here's the weird thing, 90% of that comes from rainfall. I'm thinking, rainfall? And they go, yeah, rain hits the top of the dump of the material and it filters down through the garbage and comes out the bottom. And we need to safely dispose of it, and they're handling that. It's really quite a feat. Plus I have to not only run the dump efficiently, and I'm talking, you know, Ramsey and then down by Fighting Creek, but they also have to plan for its closure and for opening a new one in 20, 30 years, depending on the site we're talking about. And this can cost tens of millions of dollars to do. And that's all has to be planned for very carefully. So when you drop off your garbage at the dump, think of everything that goes behind it, and it's a pretty amazing operation. We have a brand new hazardous waste, household hazardous waste building out there. And that's another one of these. They've done a great job, come in just about at budget, and where we can get rid of those things that you just don't throw in the landfill. Let's move on to the Veteran Service Office. That's another group that I liaison with. There are two people in that office, Tom Freeman and Terry Dickerson. Tom is the Veteran Service Officer that the county hired, Board of Commissioners hired. He's a 30-year retired Marine Corps warrant officer. So this man has got his credibility papers, you know, with the vets. And he also knows the inside and outside of the Veterans Administration, the VA bureaucracy. Now, he doesn't report to the VA. He only reports to the Board of County Commissioners, and as he puts it, to the veterans that come in. And they are working all day long, every day, 5 days a week at least, many times after hours, to help veterans get the care they're entitled to. He said to me in 2019 to 2021, the difference is $124 million to the county veterans, and now it's $138 million, plus $11.1 million in disability claims. Now, when we talk about veterans, there are 16,000, but there's also the spouses of veterans that are affected, especially as these veterans age and pass away. There's substantial benefits for the spouses, and Tom and Terry make sure those people get every penny we can for them. They have been putting articles in the media. Maybe you've seen some in the Coeur d'Alene Press, but for veterans, it's a great thing for them to be doing as publicity. The National Archives has been closed during COVID. Oh, everybody goes, what's that? Well, the National Archives is where veterans' records are kept. And when we go to help a vet, we often need records from those archives. And Veteran Service Office is working with, excuse me, Representative Fulcher to ensure those records are available. Talking about the fair, Chris mentioned 10 days. That's exciting. And I talked to Alexia Jordan, who's the general manager of the fair, and those people over there, to a person, are just about giddy about this, and they're working very hard to make sure we have as she calls it, a celebration. And I think it's going to be. I think the Kootenai, these are a couple general things. The Kootenai Electric building that we purchased was a very good purchase, and Chris kind of led the way on that. It was a very worthwhile and timely purchase. It'll provide 56, 52, how many? 56,000 square feet to us, and if you've seen that building, it's a relatively new building. We've undergone a revolution during this COVID period, a revolution in where people work and how people work. And anybody that would deny that is not aware. People who never thought they could work from home and do their job are now working from home and doing a very good job. People who were not sharing an office or sharing a desk are now sharing a desk. It's working. Our space needs have changed radically. And during a recent conversation with the architects, one of the planners said, you know, you people don't know who's going where or when. And I agree with that completely. We need first to determine that specifically and then come up with a plan. Because the plan is going to cost money. I'm on board for $18 million. The other commissioners put that at $20 million. And $20 million 4 weeks ago, or even 2 months ago, now is going to be more than that. The construction prices are going up, not geometrically, but very quickly. I had one county person who said, for the building we were going to build, we can't. I said, why not? He said, because it's twice as expensive as they told us, and they want a commitment within 2 weeks. So, good luck on the Justice Building. The other problem is that I'm not willing to go to foregone taxes at all, ever. I think foregone taxes should not be. It's a clawback of taxes that you didn't pay last year or the year before, and now we're going to come back and ask for those. I'm opposed to foregone. I always have been, I always will be. Next possibility is to pay for these things through bond, a general obligation bond. That's one way, and I'm all for that. And if we decide to go that route, I will be out there promoting this if I see the need for a building. I think it's imperative that we do that to educate people as to the need. If it's determined, that's it. I also want to talk about real quick the airport. We have an airport advisory committee, very active. There's a lot of people who want to chime in about airport things, and the advisory committee is the route to do that. And the airport director, Stephen Kierkegaard, comes right to us and brings these concerns on a regular basis. One of the things of the airport geometry has been discussed, which is an interesting, they delinking runways. We have 2 runways that cross at the end. And this has been a big issue nationally for the Federal Aviation administration because there was a relatively bad accident. 10 or 20 people were killed back east some years ago. So since that time, they've made it their mission to uncouple all these runways. And someone said, well, you don't have to do that, do you? And I said, no, we don't have to, but the FAA said if you don't, we're not going to participate in the funding of anything you do at your airport. And when they're supplying 80 and 90% on some of these projects, that's a pretty big stick. And then we were encouraged to go have a discussion with the FAA, and that's not our role. We're not going to start a war with the FAA. And also there are some great guys out there at the airport who are very experienced pilots, really know what they're doing. And they were opining on what we should do and shouldn't do as far as airport geometry. Well, the FAA has people that are specifically schooled in airport geometry. And they did a complete study on the airport and said, no, you gotta decouple, and here's what you gotta do. And they gave us a roadmap, a plan. This is great. I mean, you can fly a jet, but that doesn't mean you know how to construct a runway or an airport. It's kind of like I asked one of the guys who was vehemently opposed, do you do your own maintenance on your aircraft? And he said, no. And I said, just like airport geometry, it's something that's kind of out of your wheelhouse, isn't it? So, all in all, I think the county is doing great. It's a wonderful place to live. You've heard the comment, living the dream. Well, believe me, I believe this is it. And I thank all of you for being here today. Thank you.
So good morning, everyone. It's so nice to be back in person with groups of people. So I really appreciate that. I'm going to first start talking about facilities. Commissioner Brooks had mentioned a little bit about it. We're kind of like the county is running out of houses. The county operations is running out of room. Right now, our justice services take place in 6 separate buildings in 5 locations. So our public defender, our prosecutor, the district court clerks, courtrooms, all of those are kind of scattered about in 5 different locations. So that poses a problem in itself when you're trying to have a cohesive justice service. And that's one of the things that the county is tasked with doing, is providing these justice-related services like the sheriff and the court system and the jail. The public defender went from 35 people in 2015 when they moved into their current location to 59 people in 2021. So the current location they have is not suitable for the number of bodies that they have. So that's something that I've been working on to maybe get them a little bit more space before we can potentially build another justice service building. The prosecuting attorney has staff in 4 buildings in 2 different locations, and he also has been adding bodies as well to keep up with the demand. A few years ago when I spoke here, I talked about the population growth being somewhere around 2.5–3%, but our justice services were growing at 6%. And at one point I heard that we're about 30% out of state criminals in our justice system. So it's not just serving Kootenai County or the 5 northern counties. It's also dealing with out-of-state people. And having different laws right across the border plays into that, because I don't know if they don't realize that our laws are different, but a lot of them come over here and get in trouble for doing things that they can do at home. So that's one of the problems. We have 53 district court clerks sharing a very small space with only 2 bathrooms. And luckily, the majority of these are ladies, and they cooperate quite well. But as anybody who's been to a concert, and when there's a break, you got to wait in line, and sometimes it's not really conducive. So I'm just trying to explain how cramped we are at this point. We have 13 sitting judges with full-time offices here, plus 2 visiting judges that bring their staff with them when they visit. And right now, our 2 brand new judges, actually the 3 last judges that were appointed are in the basement of the old courthouse. So it's not that our judges need these great, glorious offices, but they do need enough room to be able to spread out their work and be able to make good determinations when the cases that they're ruling on really affects lives. It affects the lives of the criminals, the victims, and all these things. We want to make sure that they have what they need to do their job. So all that being said, we started on a process to build a building on campus to alleviate some of these pressures. Well, that's going to add a 7th building and, once again, fracturing court services. So that's a discussion that we have to continue to have. A couple ways to pay for this, as Commissioner Brooks alluded to, is the bond is one of them. And the bond doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to be taxing to support that bond. We have returning urban renewal district money coming in. We have new growth. So what the bond really is permission to borrow. And as Commissioner Filios alluded to, we did a lease option for the vehicles. So that was a very short-term thing, and we actually had money in fund balance in order to pay for this. But what we chose to do is have a reoccurring taxation. So now coming forward after the 3-year lease for the cars, we'll be able to purchase cars outright every year and kind of keep up with that growing demand. So along with buildings, we have that option as well, a lease option. So if we put out a bond and the bond were to fail, we would still be able to enter into debt to build a new building. However, to me, it's a little bit disingenuous because the whole reason for bonding is to give permission to borrow. So the lease, we would go ahead and if we chose to go that route, we could do that without permission. And so I want the public to understand that the funding source can be the same. It can be the returning URD money, but I really prefer the citizens, the voters, give us permission to borrow to house these very important services that you can't get anywhere else. And frankly, America is built on a strong justice system because if we're not protecting the rights of the innocent, then really, what are we doing? That directly affects the quality of life. Nobody wants to be sitting in jail, maybe on a false charge, and waiting a year or 2 for a court case, nor do we want victims waiting a year or 2 for justice. So these kinds of things are near and dear to my heart. I spent 10 years in law enforcement, and I really want to make sure that we get our justice system what they need to operate and to operate really well. So that's kind of the struggle that we're facing right now, is making sure that we have enough room for people and having the discussion on maybe consolidating and what that would look like. So I also agree with Commissioner Brooks that I don't want to use foregone taxes to pay for this. I think that we have other options, and I really rather support those options. And with the legislature, the foregone issue is definitely in the forefront of their mind. So they're trying to put some restrictions on it, and we should know more in the next week or 2 whether or not that's going to happen. So that's kind of justice in several nutshells. Now I'm touching on the services that I liaison with, the departments that I liaison with, and adult misdemeanor probation. As mentioned before, the jail is houses more felonies than they do misdemeanors now. And so our adult misdemeanor probation, misdemeanor is the key word here, is also seeing more felons, because what's happening is with the dual charges, especially if somebody's charged with a felony and misdemeanor, the judges know how Kootenai County A&P works, and their meticulous observation of our people on probation. And so they're starting to put these felony charges with our misdemeanor program, because our program does so well. It does so well that we were issued a grant for domestic violence court mentorship. So other domestic violence courts from around the country are going to come and observe how Kootenai County handles these types of cases. So that's pretty exciting. I think our adult misdemeanor probation director here is Keith, and correct me if I'm wrong, where's I going? This is our second year doing this, or this is? It is our first year. Okay.
It was slowed because of COVID.
That's why. Okay. So that's kind of exciting to be recognized almost countrywide, to be able to provide this training for other courts across the country and across the state. So juvenile detention, they've been returning to limited programs by outside providers and in-person parental visits. They've also been returning to. So kind of what that means is when our kids are in detention, they still go to school. They've done most of it virtually lately, and well, through COVID. And the exciting part is that they have had a significant increase of recovered credits. So and to the tune of 33 lost credits. So typically when a child ends up in juvenile detention, they have been missing some school for whatever reason. And so they are schooled there, and virtually with a low population because of COVID, they have really been able to get the schooling they need and get those lost credits back. So it sounds, I don't know if it sounds boring or dry, but it's really exciting to have our kids in this situation to be able to actually get ahead for once in their lives. So this is really an important thing that I wanted to point out. And then the in-person parental visits, they had those done virtually for a while. So they'll coming back to that. And continuing on, juvenile probation. They pretty much continued, but at a lesser level throughout COVID, and I'm glad that they were able to do that, because these kids have an opportunity now to learn some skills so they can get out of the juvenile justice system permanently and hopefully not go on to the adult system. The recidivism rates I thought were kind of interesting. Typically they're fairly low, but it shows that during COVID that they increased slightly for 6 months and 12 months. And it would be nice to have a conversation as to find out kind of what that is. Was it because school was not in session, so they had a little bit more free time? Or, what those kinds of things were. Was it extra added stress because things were in turmoil? So those are the kinds of things that I pretty much find fascinating. Okay, so now on to the fun things that Kootenai County does. Our parks and waterways, noxious weeds, and snow groomers. So Kootenai County is actually the largest provider of marine facilities of any county in Idaho. We have more than 20,000 registered boaters in Kootenai County, which is the most out of all 44 counties in the state. Those facilities range 21 public boat launches, and that's 52,000 square feet of public docks, and boating and camp facilities. There's floating restroom buildings. There's mooring buoys on 9 lakes and rivers for our boaters to enjoy. And then also for our non-boater community, we have the 6 miles of Centennial Trail that we care for. There's other recreational facilities as well. And then kind of the big news is the snow groomer program. Parks and Waterways took over the snow groomer program in 2020. And this year was their first season, the 2020-21 snow season, and they groomed 1,700 miles of snowmobile trails. Did anybody in here get out on the trails this year? I know we had kind of low snow. Okay, a couple people. Unfortunately, I didn't get to get out, but I'm looking forward to next year. I was really disappointed that we had 55 inches. I mean, that's half of what I wanted is 110 inches. So a couple years, 110 inches, and I think our growth will level out. So I am a big fan of snow. But the grooming program is excited to have the full force of the Parks and Waterways team behind it. So now instead of kind of being a part-time program, it's a full-time program. We'll have 3 certified groomer operators and be able to give real-time data next year. So in the morning, you can get up or the night before and you can see on the map what has been groomed and what they're expecting to groom. So then you can go out and play. My director did want to let everybody know that passes go on sale October 1st. Snow Groomers is 100% fee user or fee-funded user fees. So that's kind of how they operate. And at this point, that's kind of what I liaison to and kind of my passions with the justice system. And I think we're going to open it up to some questions, and I'll let Nancy.
Good morning. My name is Nancy Jones. For those of you that don't know me, I am the Board of Commissioners Communications Manager. And at this time, we want to go ahead and open this up for questions. Did anyone have questions for the commissioners this morning?
It's not really just it's a question, it's more a comment. Commissioner Brooks, and I understand you can't fight FAA, but as a former pilot, I think it's very unfortunate what's going to happen. It's going to make a much less user-friendly airport, and I think you could argue less safe. And it all comes from, I believe, only one accident that happened at a decoupled runway where a pilot did not reset his heading indicator properly before taking off. So we're going to go rearrange all the airports around the country because of one accident back east. It's too bad, but I know you got to fight them. Can't fight FAA.
I think a lot of people share your feelings. And the most important thing you said was we can't fight FAA. And not only is it one accident, but how many years ago was that? 20 years or 10 years?
Maybe.
It's, I'm sorry, but anyway, if we're not gonna do it, they're not gonna help us fund the airport, so we're kind of stuck. And that's just the way federal government works.
Do we have any other questions?
Good morning. I volunteer for guest services at the Museum of North Idaho. And I'm not sure to whom to address this question, but I was asked by a visitor last week about the levels of lead in the lake. And she had 3 young children and said, is it safe for them to swim here? So I did the little hat dance and said, of course it is, but I would like to know, what is the status of the lake?
I have swam in the lake 4 to 5 times a week for 20 years. I'm still cancer-free. So I would have to say it's safe. I don't know what the level is. I can't respond to you specifically. I think the study by the NAS is going to reveal that more definitively. But if your question is it safe? The answer is yes, it is safe. Because lead is one of those one of the heavy metals that is currently buried, along with lead and zinc and cadmium. And as long as they remain buried, we're fine. It's when the oxygen level in the lake drops that these heavy metals or the tailings essentially rise to the surface, and that hasn't happened yet. But one of the major concerns is the oxygen level, but thus far it's safe.
Any of you 3 can. I don't want to put you on the spot, but it was an interesting conversation we had when we were discussing community development, planning and building. And I always kind of knew that solid waste had a definitively different, which is enterprise accounting, which basically any fees they collect stay within that entity. And I guess, to put you on the spot a little bit, is there any way to do that potentially with community development? And because I know that builders and developers that I've spoken with, they would be happy to pay more if those monies wouldn't go back into the general fund, and then they'd have to go back and fight for the funds to deal with their department. And just, I know it's a broad question.
Well, actually, that's a good question. So what happened, Tom, is I think it was just last week that we approved the fee increase. So some of the fees are increasing dramatically, some of them 4 and 5 times. Because the fees that were in place by community development, there was no rationale. And so thanks to our finance director and our auditing department with Dina Darrow and Dave Callahan and his people, they got together. They did a comprehensive cost analysis, and the fees, those are going into effect this month. So we don't necessarily, and the fee revenue will stay with community development.
And you're able to do that?
Yeah.
So the problem is the fees haven't been supporting it. General tax dollars have been supporting it. So there won't be, yeah.
Right.
And so the issue is going to be, there probably will not be an excess in funds. So I don't know if we'll ever be able to get to that point where community development is not only 100% self-funded, but they have excess. I don't think that that's going to happen.
That's correct. That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, and by statute, they cannot make a profit.
Right.
They can only cover their costs.
Thank you.
One of the things that I've recently been asked to look into is impact fees. And when I was running last time, I met with the NIBCA board, and I said, I really can't take your money because I believe in impact fees, I really do. And they said, well, we do too, they just have to be fair and uniform and legal. So that's what I'm going to be working on. I used to be a realtor, I was a broker and very active in our association, but as soon as I was elected, I let my license go inactive. Just so people don't say there's a conflict of interest there. But impact fees are something we should consider. I mean, they're used all over the country and very successfully to help fund the growth that we're experiencing.
And Commissioner Filios, there's a new group that's been formed with multiple municipalities to look at growth, isn't there?
That is correct, and it was actually initiated, I guess, by Kiki Miller and Hillary Anderson with the city. And basically what it is, it's a collection of planners among the cities within the county, and the county itself. David Callahan will represent us as well as myself. And the issue is to try to get us in a collaborative manner to come up with a comprehensive planning process so that the ACIs are coordinating well with the county and the other jurisdictions around them. And it's very new, it's nascent, it just started about a couple of weeks ago, but initially the effort's going to be to get all the planners together to try to come up with a comprehensive county-wide land use approach. I guess that's the best way to put it. And it was basically spurred on by growth. Some of you may have noticed there's a thread on Facebook, Responsible North Idaho Growth. And I don't know, they're sporting now 1,300 or 1,500 people, and frequently some of the posts don't make any sense, but that's beside the point. And that's to be expected because when we're talking land use and growth, there are laws, there are statutes in place. For example, people will say, well, just go do a moratorium. In the state of Idaho, you have a 6-month limit. And there must be impending harm. We can't just declare a moratorium because we think it's growing too fast. It doesn't work, not in the state of Idaho. So there are rules and there are regulations in place. The thing is, how do we bring it all together into a single effort that's coordinated?
One of the concerning things I heard from you guys today was talking about the relative number of misdemeanors versus felonies. So kind of a two-part question. Can you guys talk a little bit about the cost difference of housing a misdemeanor criminal versus a felon? And can you also talk about any programs or studies that are done to help reduce the amount of felons? Because my assumption would be it costs a lot more to house a felon than it does a misdemeanor criminal. Is there any programs or things like that to help reduce and maybe flip that script of, obviously crime's going to happen, natural population, but is there any way of reducing the number of felons? Because I would assume that costs more.
I'll take a stab at this, excuse me. And we do have our elected prosecutor, Barry McHugh, here as well. So when we talk about housing felons versus misdemeanors, these are not adjudicated cases. So these are just waiting for trial. Once they're convicted of a felony, they go to the state. Is that correct, Barry? Because I don't know that they serve out a felon sentence in our jail.
If they're sentenced to prison, then they go to the state.
Okay, yeah, so if they're sentenced to prison, they go to the state. So typically misdemeanors, they're housed there. And it really doesn't cost any more. With the jail expansion, more separation was designed and built. So misdemeanors can typically be handled in pods, and then felonies are more segregated. So it doesn't necessarily day-to-day, it's just the overall build of the jail costs a little bit more to have those separate segregations. And the segregations also have levels, they're classifications. So if somebody comes in with this type of felony and this type of history, then they have to be put in this type of housing, if that makes sense. So yeah, so I don't know that it really necessarily costs more, but once again, what does our society want to do? Do we want to decriminalize drugs, which I don't recommend? It's all about what the felon, what are the felony charges? So it just happens to be that that's where the shift has come, so.
I think all three of us can attest to the fact that our jail is very well run, because on a regular basis, two of us have to go through the jail with the deputies and inspect it. And honestly, in 3 or 4 visits that I've had during my tenure, I've never found anything amiss. The deputies are always very forthright with what's going on. I visited all portions of the jail, the health area, the kitchen, and peeked in on the inmates, and it's very, very well run. We're fortunate to have a jail like this. And the one part of the jail that's not built out yet, we had a shell built when we built the most recent build, and you can play basketball in there. I mean, I think it seems to me to be about as big as this room. I mean, do you know how many square feet that is, Nancy? It's big. At high ceilings, 2-story. So we have room to expand in. It's already been, in large part, paid for.
I guess I can just add juvenile back into that. With our strong, really juvenile justice program with our probation and our detention, those programs in there are trying to help these kids to keep them out of the adult jail. So that's one way that we can help the population, I suppose, is just keep support for those juvenile programs.
So we're actually running a little light on time, but what I'm going to do is ask you guys one question. Can anybody in this room tell me who in the county has the authority to arrest the county sheriff? No, you don't get to answer, Keith. It's the county coroner. The county coroner has the authority to arrest the sheriff. And I tell you that to show you there are lots of other things you don't know, and some of them are even a little interesting. And so what I would encourage you to do, if you do still have questions, I saw a few more hands, please reach out to us. I like to tell people that 80% of my job is answering questions, and I love doing that. If I don't know, I will get you to the person who does know. Filling out records requests is a highly underutilized service. You can look at the records of the county, they are public. Also, we encourage you to follow us on Facebook. That is a great way to find out what's going on in the county. You can also follow us on Nextdoor. If you liked the graphs that Commissioner Filios shared today, we have a lot of very solidly verified information right on our homepage of our website. Click on the button that says Performance Indicators. You can see real-time budget data for every department in the county. Those growth statistics, tax information, elections results. And with that, I'm going to share with you just a couple of pieces of information. First of all, DMV, we know that there is a backup in DMV appointments 30 to 45 days out. Our DMV offices are each handling more than 100 appointments a day. It is getting better. We are taking walk-ins. There's been a lot of question in the community, can you walk in the morning? We can take, give or take, about 60, 65 walk-in people a day in addition to our appointments. Elections, you know, there's a big election coming up May 18th. This Friday is the last day to register to vote, otherwise you have to wait until Election Day. May 7th is the last day to request an absentee ballot for this election. And finally, as Commissioner Filio said, the fair, we're very excited to go from a 5 to 10 day fair this year, but volunteers will be needed. There's sponsorship information on their website, exhibitor and vendor, and volunteer applications. So thank you all so much for being here with us today. For people who joined us on Zoom, thank you for being with us virtually, and the rest of you, it is so good to see smiling, familiar faces in person.
Driver's license is down to 10 days on the queue list.
Yes, driver's license is down to 10 days on queue list, and vehicle licensing, which are separate, is getting better every day. So again, thank you all so much for being here with us today. We hope you learned something.